Gentlemen, welcome back to the Conflict Zone, your go-to source for insightful discussions on international affairs, law, and security. I'm your host, Dr. Christian Barrientos Ichaso, and today we have a truly exceptional episode lined up for you. We're diving deep into the heart of the matter, exploring the unfolding events in Ukraine and shedding light on the expertise of a distinguished journalist who has covered such critical international conflicts. Our featured guest needs no introduction to those who closely follow military and intelligence matters. With an impressive career spanning numerous renowned media outlets, Martin Arostegui stands as a beacon of experience and knowledge in his field. Martin Arostegui's remarkable career. Martin Arostegui is not just a journalist, but a seasoned war correspondent who has ventured into the heart of conflict zones to bring us the stories that shape our understanding of global events. He's been a voice for the voiceless, reporting on the complexities and nuances of international conflicts that mirror the current situation unfolding in Ukraine. Arostegui's byline has graced the pages of reputable publications such as Voice of America, The Wall Street Journal, The Daily Telegraph, The Washington Times, CNN, FOX News, UPI, and France 24. His reporting has provided invaluable insights into the world of military operations, intelligence strategies, and geopolitical dynamics. Twilight Warriors, exploring military special operations. But Martin Arostegui's influence doesn't end with his reporting. He is also an accomplished author, having penned the enlightening book Twilight Warriors. This book delves into the world of military special operations, shining a light on the brave men and women who undertake covert missions to ensure our security.
Okay, Christian.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for subscribing to The Conflict Zone. It's your podcast. Thank you, Martin. How are you?
Hey, Christian, how are you? How are things? Glad to be on board as usual. And, well, I think we've got a lot to talk about today. Basically, I've been doing a lot of work, just finished an article for the American Spectator on Ukraine, and doing something similar for Diario Las Americas, where the situation is, of course, look, I mean, I really think it's coming to a head right now. Russia is getting very close now to its ultimate, I would say, yes, its ultimate, certainly its immediate territorial objective in the area of Donetsk. It's attacking a ridgeline separating Bakhmut, which Russia took over a year ago, at massive loss, which many analysts wonder why is it so. Why did they spend somewhere between 30 and 50,000 lives taking Bakhmut? The Economist even called this something with absolutely no strategic importance. Others said it was symbolic. It was simply to show that they were gaining something in their from the Ukrainians. But I think now it's clear, and it's been clear to me for quite some time, and I predicted this over in our podcast as well as in my articles, that Bakhmut positions them for their final push onto Kramatorsk, onto the limits of the Donbass region, the Sloviansk Donetsk River, which is where I think Putin will redraw Russia's boundaries. Okay, he will at that point. He may sit down and offer to negotiate once he's gotten to the Sloviansk Donetsk River and taken the industrial hub of Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, and a couple of other smaller towns in this river valley, which is beyond the ridgeline that he's now attacking. You have basically Russian troops attacking from Bakhmut over a 10-mile stretch to Chasiv Yar, which is a fortified town over a ridgeline separating Bakhmut from Kramatorsk. We're talking about relatively small distances here, okay? Maybe a 30-mile stretch between Bakhmut and Kramatorsk, separated by this Ukrainian fortification in Chasiv Yar, on this ridgeline, shallow ridgeline. It isn't, I mean, you're not talking about very, very large mountains or anything. So this is where the push is taking place right now. This is where Putin is putting everything he's got. He's got 2 divisions, 25,000 men, maybe more by now, that was by the last count, pushing on Chasiv Yar. And plus, possibly 2 more divisions moving up from the south, from Avdiivka, which again he took some weeks ago. And he's now pushing from Avdiivka west, but also, I think, northwest as well, opening a salient, going through several towns that he's taking, several villages, which I think he's pushing up to possibly link up with the force from Bakhmut. If these forces link up, and I think there's maybe about 40 miles separating them at this point, then they would surround the Ukrainian fortifications at Chasiv Yar, take the ridgeline, possibly move or find alternative routes around it into the Kramatorsk, Sloviansk industrial hub. I mean, you're talking about, these are major cities, okay? Bigger than anything that taken until now. Kramatorsk, 100,000 people. Sloviansk is something similar. There are other towns with also large populations in this river valley on the Donetsk-Sloviansk River. They've got big steel mills, gas fields, iron ore mines, sophisticated engineering facilities, and think tanks in the area. So this will be a prize for Russia. If they take this, they've taken eastern Ukraine. They've taken the Donbass. And I think, as I said, at that point, Putin might offer to negotiate once he's got that, and he can delineate a new Russian border along the Sloviansk River. And he has virtually all of Donbass and the industrial hub of eastern Ukraine under his control. This is what he's going for. And he's putting everything in there. You know, he's got some, what I would call diversionary, maybe attacks going on up towards Kharkiv. Everybody thought would be the likeliest target. I mean, that's what Ukraine recaptured, if you recall, a couple of years ago. 1.5 years ago by now. It's close to Russia. It threatens Russia's own border. But I think he'll go for that later. At the moment, he's going to go for Kramatorsk, and he's going to try to take Chasiv Yar in the next days or weeks. The question now is where, the $61 billion in US aid that was finally approved by Congress, okay, despite the resistance from Republicans who had tried to leverage the aid that Biden was requesting for Ukraine with their demands for him to close the border with Mexico, which is, from their perspective, is another, we're preventing an invasion by Russia of Ukraine and allowing an invasion of the United States from Mexico. You've got 20,000 Chinese military-aged men coming in over the past recently. From what I understand, they're even under some kind of control by Chinese operatives in Tamaulipas, which is their staging ground to cross the U.S. border. So the Republicans have every reason in the world to be concerned about what is happening in Mexico. It is a potential invasion of the U.S. covertly, being used by China and possibly by Hezbollah and Russia as well. There are Russians there. There are Russians there too. But anyway, we'll deal with that later. Finally, I think the Speaker of the House, Johnson, realized that he had to agree to for the purposes, geopolitical considerations, he had to agree to let the raid and for Ukraine go through. $61 billion, which is more than the U.S. has given, which is more than the total amount of aid the U.S. has given Ukraine so far. Until now, they've given $45 billion. They're now getting $61 billion. But under the circumstances, it's probably the minimum required to block a Russian advance, to block a Russian takeover of the entire Donbass, assuming it gets there on time. Because I mean, we're now talking about very small timelines. The distances involved are shrinking. And as far as the Russian advance to the ultimate targets is concerned. And 61 million may be enough, assuming it gets in there on time and is distributed properly, okay? There are already indications that some of the air defenses are getting through. One of the main Russian advantages in their more recent operations has been their air dominance, their ability to strike at will with their Su-34 fighter bombers, who have been leveling Ukrainian positions. I mean, you're talking about Ukrainian positions which are nowhere near as well engineered or as fortified as, say, the Russian lines were when the Ukraine tried its counteroffensive. The trench lines are not well dug in. They're not well connected from what I hear, from the information available. The bunkers don't have the depth or the reinforced concrete to withstand the kind of bombing they're getting from the Russians. They're dropping 1 ton, even 1.5 ton glide bombs on the Ukrainian locations, which these Su-34s are equipped. They have the right sensors and guidance systems to shoot. They sort of fire them from the planes. The bombs shoot out wings which allow them to glide guided by from the cockpit, from the Su-34 cockpit onto their targets. So they're pretty accurate. And when you consider the type of the huge payloads, explosive payloads they carry, when they hit the Ukrainian trenches, even if they don't hit exactly where it's supposed to go, the damage is massive. I mean, you're talking about 30-foot craters, okay? That'll sink an entire trench line, even if it doesn't hit exactly where it's supposed to go. I mean, this is what the Russians are dealing with. Due to the lack of air defense missiles, which Ukraine has developed as a result of the delayed Western aid, these planes were able to operate the Su-34s were able to operate pretty much with impunity, pretty freely along the front. But over the past few days, they have been getting shot down at a pretty high rate. I think 13 have been lost over the past week. Okay, so it seems like I don't know if the new air defense missiles are getting through, or if the Ukrainians are using the reserve right now, anticipating that the new missiles will get to them, or are getting to them. And so I think that perhaps they're now able to curtail and possibly counter the Russian air operations, which was a major part of their ability to advance on Ukrainian positions. So perhaps there's a chance they may hang on to Chasiv long enough for the other suppliers to get to the mainly 155 millimeter artillery shells, which they were running drastically very, very short of, or ammunition, HIMARS rockets, other stuff that could really blunt the Russian advance. So that's where we are now. But as I say, the Russians are now very close to their ultimate objective. We're talking, distances of 30, 20, 10, 30 miles from their key objectives. Put it this way, if Chasiv falls, and they've already got Russians have already taken villages around it, and possibly advancing to reinforce the Russian force from the south, from the Avdiivka direction. If Chasiv falls, the Russians will control the high ground overlooking the Donetsk Sloviansk River Valley, Kramatorsk, and the entire industrial hub there. It'd be impossible for that region to hold out very long under those circumstances. And Ukraine will have to negotiate at that point. I mean, I don't see that they've got a choice. Either that, or the Russians will just level from, assuming they don't take Kramatorsk, they will just destroy it or push, positioning their artillery on the high ground in the Chasiv Yar ridgeline. Okay. So that'll put Ukrainian control over the Donbass with the remaining control they have in the Donbass in a completely disadvantageous position. And so I think that if Russians take Chasiv Yar, that's pretty much it. They've got the Donbass. Okay. How long it will take them to actually occupy Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, and the industrial hub there, we don't know. The Ukrainians have a way of resisting for very long, and it'll be a long, drawn-out meat grinder process. Could take months. But with Chasiv Yar taken, the Russians control and can move on, virtually control the Donbass. Okay, no question about it. So that's where we are now. Frankly, there's all this talk. The Europeans I think they're very concerned now. I think they're really getting scared. Macron has said incredible things. Macron, who about 2 years ago, I remember covering his trip to Washington, in which he talked about negotiating with Russia. He was at the head of the negotiating corner in NATO, right? The negotiating corner there. Him and Schultz in Germany. Now he's totally turned around. He's talking about sending French troops to Ukraine unilaterally to hold the line. I suppose the front line. I suppose he must mean Chasiv Yar, if the Russians break through. And the British are also, they're rushing missiles, and they're rushing Storm Shadow missiles, 1,600 missiles. So they may have gotten to Ukraine by now. And following a summit, they haven't said they're going to send troops, and because the British don't have that many troops. Their army has been reduced to about 75,000 men, 75,000 women, 75,000. I mean, that's nothing. Okay, the Russians lose that, expend that in a month, right? In 2 months, the Russians recruit 60,000 at their current mobilization rate. If the Brits were to put their entire army in Ukraine, it's 2 months worth of Russian mobilization. Okay, it's nothing. It's a joke. So I don't know if the French army is slightly larger, not much bigger. So I think we're getting. I don't know. You remember the Charge of the Light Brigade in the Crimean War? We might be getting a replay of the Crimean War. Remember the Charge of the Light Brigade? Ours is not the reason why. Ours is not to do or die. Into the valley of death, into the jaws of hell rode the 600. It's a poem written by Alfred Lord Tennyson about the way the British cavalry brigade charged Russian guns in Sevastopol during the Crimean War in that area of the world back in the 1850s. Decided they were going to stop a possible Russian advance on Turkish, then Turkish-controlled areas in Eastern Europe against the Ottoman Empire, which they were defending against Russia. They were very afraid of it. So I think you might be getting a historical replay on that, if the defense of Ukraine ultimately depends on any deployment of European troops. I don't think they'll do the job. I really don't. They certainly won't keep the Russians out of Donbass if that's the objective. So I really think that Macron, threatening to send French troops into if the Russians break through the front line, is pretty much, I would consider it pretty much an empty threat, right? The French, the Brits, the Americans can supply a lot of arms to the Ukrainians now. $61 million is a lot of money. They might be able to stop Putin. They would certainly stop Putin from going any further than the Donbass, which I think is a realistic objective by now. especially it's going to get F-16s, which would further challenge Russian air superiority. I don't think that these fears of Russia going further from Ukraine, attacking Poland, or the Baltic states are really that serious. I think if for the moment, I mean, we don't know about eventually or years from now, but for the moment, as I say, I think if Putin gets the Donbass, he'll stop there and demand a negotiated settlement by which Russian control over eastern Ukraine, 20% of Ukraine at that point, would be recognized by Ukraine and NATO. So we'll see. I think that is the likeliest scenario that's likely to develop from this. I don't think there's any chance of pushing the Russians back at this stage, recapturing territory, which was Zelensky's ambition. I think even the Ukrainians themselves are saying that that's no longer possible. In fact, it's interesting that the American Abrams tanks, M1 Abrams tanks, that were supposed to spearhead a new counteroffensive, were just withdrawn from the front line last week, after 5 of them were hit by Russian drones, right? So that's the way I see that conflict moving. Meanwhile, of course, Russia is moving ahead with geopolitical moves all over the world. I mean, they're in the Sahel region, where now you have 3 or 4 Sahel countries under pro-Russian military dictatorships, which have kicked out the French completely. The French are out. There was a question as to whether they may allow an American drone base to remain in Niger because it was helping the Nigerians against the Islamic insurgents. But the Russians are now occupying that. Okay, before the Americans even pull out in a supposed negotiation with the Nigerian government, which suppose they had sent a diplomatic delegation there to conduct and everything, the Russians are already moving into their base near Niamey, near the capital. So the Russians have taken over Sahel. They've taken over Central Africa. They're consolidating Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali into a confederation of pro-Russian states. They're creating a new Russian superstate, pro-Russian superstate in Sahel. Right? This may be the reason why maybe Macron suddenly got very hawkish in Ukraine. The French were, they were run out of there. They were pushed out by Russia out of what were their former colonies, where there until now they maintained political control through a military presence. They were getting a lot of uranium out of Niger for their for their substantial nuclear power stations and their nuclear program, and all that's gone. All that's gone. And I think this may have scared Macron. This may be the reason that Macron is taking a very strong anti-Russia position in Ukraine. Why he switched. Awesome. That's my own speculation. People are giving all kinds of reasons. I mean, I've read a lot of analyses which really don't give why Macron has had this turnaround, and I think that's really it. In Sudan, they're backing the RSF, Russia, involved in a genocidal war now against the standing government. And of course, Russia expects to get a base out of on the Red Sea from this. And believe me, any settlement of the civil war in Sudan will have to allow Russia to establish a Red Sea, a naval base on the Red Sea. Without that, there'll be no settlement. All right. Okay, believe me. Without a Russian base in the Red Sea, there'll be no settlement to the civil war in Sudan. Forget it. And the Houthis have now, they virtually got the Red Sea blocked, and they're allies of Iran, whose relationship with Russia is growing. In fact, Russia is now selling or supplying, I don't know exactly what the transactional arrangements are, the most modern Sukhoi 35 fighters to Iran. These are the most sophisticated fighters currently operating in Ukraine. In fact, they're very good. Very few of them have been shot down. I think I've lost maybe 2 over the past couple of weeks, which is pretty good. I mean, they're not fighter bombers; they're more for air-to-air combat and to deliver as platforms for cruise missile attacks. But they will be very useful, in fact, for Israel for Iran if they're planning any further attacks on Israel. It will certainly enhance their capabilities to do so and to defend from any Israeli counterattack on Iran. So if this is true, again, the Russians say they're going to do all kinds of things, but if this is true, if they are supplying the Sukhoi 35s to Iran, this is a major, a very important strategic arm gain enhancement for the Iranians. And in Central America, the Russians are moving in to Nicaragua in a big way. They've just taken over the training of the national police, which indicates that they're prepared to colonize the country. I mean, if they're going to control the internal security service, if you're not going to control the internal security services, which it means, train the police, going to control the police. That means the Russians plan to move in there in a big way. They already have a satellite station there. They already have a radar. So what exactly they plan to do in Nicaragua, we don't know at this stage. Of course, that their Nicaragua coordinates with Venezuela and Cuba. So where there's a new Chinese major electronic listening station now being established in Lourdes, taking over from where the Russians were operating from. So it certainly strengthens the pro-Russian, pro-Chinese triangle operating in the Central American Caribbean region right now. So that's the Russians are on the move. They keep on the move, and as I say, assuming they were stopped in Ukraine, their territorial objectives that Putin had projected are pretty much achieved at this point. Pretty much achieved. Christian,
Yeah,
what do you think?
it's very true. Iran have a reason for new negotiation in Latin America too. Russia, China, and Iran. Remember, Iran have an interest in military cooperation with Bolivia, and new deals with Bolivia and Nicaragua and Venezuela. Iran is the regime of Iran with the Quds have a president in Bolivia with 700 soldiers who moved to front to Argentina and Ciudad del Este. That is the very.
There are 700.
Yeah.
Sorry, there are 700. Sorry, Christian, I interrupt.
Yeah,
Let me get that
700.
clear now. There are 700 Al-Quds
in Bolivia.
Iranian
Al-Quds
forces in Bolivia.
Yeah, that's
incredible.
Yes, it's incredible. It's incredible. That's the report of the Argentina Prime Minister talk about the 700 Quds force in Bolivia to move to the other country in the region. That's very dangerous. That's very dangerous. That's terrible. Iran is a principal terrorist state with the Hezbollah support to Hezbollah, to Libya Hezbollah. That is very very difficult for the people who live in Bolivia, who live in South America, for new attacks, terrorist attack, and embassies, attacks in negotiation or all interested to attack. Israel, American embassy. That's the danger. Very dangerous.
There are 700 Al-Quds in Bolivia. And you say they're being concentrated on the border with Argentina?
Yes, with Bolivian passport. That's the next identity ID with the Bolivian passport have this Iran.
I mean, they're operating covertly. Is that it?
Covered, yeah. Uncovered. All these forces in uncovered. With the President RC deal with the Iran negotiation about we don't know, but have 700 persons here support this terrorist attack. We need to prevent this.
They're operating with Bolivian passports and entering. They're entering Argentina and I assume Paraguay. That's I suppose Chile as well.
Chile,
North Chile, and Peru. I understand there was a Hezbollah, well, no, I don't know, Hezbollah or Quds Iranian caught entering Peru. I heard about that. That was some time ago, correct?
Yes.
Some of them had been caught entering Peru, right?
Right.
Christian?
Yeah.
Sorry, Christian. Have we gotten disconnected?
Hello. You should stop your. I can see you.
Are we disconnected?
Disconnected, but I can hear you. You can hear me? Oh, we stopped here. Yeah, that's it. That's the.
I'm just saying. I mean, these Iranians operating from Bolivian passports, infiltrating clandestinely. I guess into all the neighboring countries: Argentina, Paraguay, Chile, and Peru.
Yeah,
I understand some of them were caught. Some of them were caught going into Peru. Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Very dangerous.
Yeah, and the U.S. border is also very, very dangerous. I was just talking with someone who was in Tamaulipas, which is the state town for a lot of the migrant waves into the U.S. And he says, he didn't talk so much about the Iranians, which of course they're going through. I mean, you've got Iranians with Venezuelan passports. Again, Hezbollah people, Iranian Quds people with a massive amount of Venezuelan passports also operating throughout Latin America and entering the U.S. But this person I spoke with talking about Chinese teens he had seen, which, some of the conservatives are talking about. Military-aged Chinese men at hostels occupying entire hostels in Tamaulipas on the Mexican side of the border, under direction. I mean, these weren't just guys, coming through, landing there on their own. No. These were directed, organized groups of Chinese young men to cross the border illegally into the United States.
Yeah, that's the PSC, the Communist Party of China.
Yeah. So definitely CCP organized militias, and so that's another invasion that's taking place there. Which I could fully understand the Republican point of view, which is they were delaying. If Ukraine is, they were virtually telling Biden, well, if Ukraine is so important to you, then I think the U.S. should be as important as well. But I guess eventually, I think they did the right thing. I think there's no reason we should lose Ukraine because Biden insists on keeping the border open, and some controls have been put in place recently. I think he's allowed Texas to mobilize the National Guard and strengthen border controls there. At least he hasn't objected. He hasn't put up any opposition to that, but he could have. He could have sent in federal troops to prevent Texas from doing it on their own. So, I'm not saying this is an incredible concession by the Biden administration, but he's had no choice but he's obviously had to allow the states to take initiatives to control the massive influx of the invasion on the U.S. border. Again, we go into the reasons for this. The allegation is that the Democrats hope all these people are going to vote Democrat, that they're going to the far left of the Democratic Party, which has taken a lot of control of the American Democratic Party, are planning to use this to virtually. If you got 15 more million potential voters in the U.S., you can establish one-party state there. And that would guarantee
No guarantee.
far left Democrat control over. You could conceivably establish one-party state. In fact, I think they would have done this. They would have done this if H.R. 1, which was a bill to federalize American national elections, had been passed, which is one of the first initiatives taken by Biden. One of the first things he did when he came to office in 2020, 2021, was to introduce the H.R. 1 Act to federalize the U.S. election system. Put it all under control of one electronic voting system, Dominion systems it would have been. Put the make voter ID not required, which would have made it possible for all these illegal aliens to vote. Yeah. So if they had done that, America would be headed right now. We can forget free elections 2024, or fair elections, or what do you want to call them. You would have virtually the abolition of one-party state happening in the U.S. right now. It failed by one vote in the Senate. Senator from West Virginia, Manchin. He's been, again, look, Republicans. Somebody was called them a stupid party, right? They should frankly take on Manchin as. They shouldn't be building a statue to the guy, but no, they're treating him very badly. They put another Republican in to beat him in the new West Virginia elections. It's like they're not sure who their friends and who their enemies are. But one vote in the Senate, and America today would be a far left Democrat one-party state. That's what happened.
That's what happened. Thank you, Martin. That's the time is off. Thank you all. Subscribe to The Conflict Zone is your podcast. Thank you, Martin. See you again the next podcast in The Conflict Zone.
See you later, Christian. Take care.
Bye.
Analyzing the situation in Ukraine. Today, we're fortunate to have Martin Arostegui with us, providing his expertise on the developing situation in Ukraine. As tensions rise and international concerns mount, Arostegui's insights will offer a deeper understanding of the complexities at play and the potential implications for global stability. A message from Dr. Christian Barrientos Ichaso. Before we kick off our conversation, I'd like to take a moment to express my gratitude to our audience. Your support, subscriptions, and engagement keep our mission alive to foster awareness and understanding of critical international matters. As an international company and business lawyer, I am deeply committed to sharing insights on international law, security, compliance, anti-corruption measures, tackling crime, and facilitating smooth trade relations. Stay connected. So whether you're an avid follower of international affairs, a business professional navigating the complexities of global trade, or someone seeking clarity amidst the chaos of international conflicts, podcast The Conflict Zone is your destination for accurate information and informed discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, grab your notepads, ready your questions, and get ready for an illuminating conversation with the one and only Martin Arostegui. Stay tuned because you won't want to miss a single moment of this episode. Thank you for joining us, and let's dive right into the heart of the matter.